And good Sunday afternoon, everyone. This is John and Sean with Pure Adrenaline Fantasy Sports. Once again, we are joined by Jeremy from NFL Chaos with Jeremy. Sean, how are you this afternoon?
I'm pretty good, John. How are you?
Good, doing well. Jeremy, how are you this morning?
I'm doing all right. Just waking up.
Good. We're going to get into the tight ends here. But before we do that, we will see you on the other. So the tight ends, usually there's only a couple that are draftable early in fantasy leagues. But what do you guys think of the tight end position overall? Anybody stood out to you? And then we'll dive into the projections, and then we'll dive into the stats.
Yeah, I just think that this year the tight end position kind of grew, I think, overall, because a lot of teams you saw using two tight ends more than normal, and the fact that more tight ends were getting red zone targets in the typical year. I just think that the position's finally starting to grow with George Kittle, obviously Travis Kelce, Andrews, and Waller. It's only getting better slowly as years progress, and they're kind of just an extra wide receiver on the field at this point. Slowly as years progress. And
Jeremy, your thoughts on tight ends?
I think that tight end is becoming more and more important, and it's becoming more evident that they're important. I think a tight end makes a quarterback significantly better. Like, for example, I think Kittle makes Jimmy G a lot more digestible. And I think the evidence is right there. Look at the Niners offense and look at Jimmy G when Kittles is not in the game and when he is in the game. It's a different quarterback. So I think the tight end is becoming really important for the quarterback on a team.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. Let's say hello to Gunnar in the chat. Gunnar, how are you? Thanks for joining. Once we're going through the rankings here, let us know your thoughts. Or if you have any comments or any other questions about fantasy football, let us know. So, guys, let's jump in here. Coming in our preseason top 10, we had coming in at number 10, Noah Fant from Denver, Tonyan from Green Bay, Logan Thomas from Washington, Higbee from the Rams, Pitts from the Falcons, Hawkinson from Detroit, Andrews from Baltimore, Kittle from the 49ers, Waller from the Raiders, and Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs. Your guys' thoughts on the top 10 preseason projections?
I think it was pretty accurate from the preseason aspect. That's what we pretty much expected to see. Because you expected the Lions with Goff to throw Hawkinson a lot because that's what Stafford did. Pitts, we weren't unsure yet what was going to come about because of him being a rookie. But with Higbee, Thomas, Tonyan, and Fant, we knew they were going to be close to the top 10 because the top four there pretty much are going to be your top four for a lot of years to come overall, just for the fact of that they're pretty much an extra wide receiver on the field.
Yeah, Jeremy, thoughts on the preseason projections?
Yeah, they're good. You could shuffle around the top three a little bit and it wouldn't matter. And, you don't know who's going to get injured and what quarterback might get hurt and what's going to happen when you're making these predictions. So, but this looks like it's hard to really argue or passionately make any points that would say that this wasn't a good projection or a solid projection.
Right, agreed. So let's look at it here. Let's start with number 10. Gunnar says the Kansas City Chiefs are his favorite team. Yeah, tough end to the season there, but lots to look forward to in Kansas City. But coming in at number 10 was Mike Gesicki from the Miami Dolphins. He's a free agent this year, but we had him projected 55 catches, 610 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He ends up with 73 catches, 780 yards, but only 2 touchdowns. Your guys' thoughts on Gesicki, and if your team needs a tight end, do you want them to sign him in free agency?
Oh, yeah. I'd love for the Vikings to sign Gesicki just because he's a big-bodied tight end. So not only would he help with the run blocking, on the right-hand side or left-hand side, it would also help for the fact of short gain of yards. You could always throw it up to the big man, and he's going to help the team get first downs. But whoever ends up getting Gesicki is going to get definitely a top 10 tight end in the league right now. He's only getting better as the years go on in his career. So I wouldn't be shocked if this upcoming year he doesn't grow on the 780 yards. Not sure of the 70 plus receptions again, but I would think the yardage and the touchdowns could definitely improve a lot with him this year.
Yeah, Jeremy, your thoughts on Gesicki, and if you think your Jets should go after him in free agency.
Well, it always depends on price when you talk about free agents, right? What are you sacrificing in cap space? People don't look at it always like that, but to me, it's not about money. It's about the cap space and percentage of cap space. That's an asset. I like him. I mean, obviously he rose to the occasion in a contract year. And he is progressing each year. He's a great receiving tight end, and it's good to hear he's big bodied and good at run blocking because I wasn't sure of that. But that's a good thing to hear. The Jets definitely need an all around tight end, not just a one sided one. So, look, if they sign him, I wouldn't complain. There's a lot of avenues to go. Just as a Jet fan, I trust my GM. I put a lot of faith in Joe Douglas right now. Especially, when it comes to offensive line and tight end. So, whatever he does, I'm going to be okay with it and excited about it. Gesicki certainly would be a great target for Zach Wilson. There'd be it'd be crazy not to be excited about that, but you wouldn't want to see them overpay.
Yeah, agreed. And Gesicki did go to Penn State, which they do require their tight ends to be able to block as well. That's more important to them than the receiving aspect. Even though the last couple of guys that have come out of there, him and Freiermuth are both very good receiving tight ends. But go ahead, Sean.
And you also think about it, when he was in college, he was blocking for Saquon Barkley at Penn State. So he was blocking a lot. So you can only think about it, if he was on a team that runs the ball a lot more than what Miami does, what could he do?
Right. So let's keep moving here. Coming in at number 9, they actually finished the same. They both had Gesicki and Goddard had 163 points. But in the preseason, we had Goddard at 11, 60 catches, 664 yards, 4 touchdowns. He ends up with 56 catches, 830 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I know he missed some time. I don't know how many games he missed, but your guys' thoughts on Goddard and moving forward with Philadelphia?
Yeah, I know I believe he got a contract extension this year after they traded Ertz. But I think he'll be a good connection piece with Jalen Hurts this year. If Hurts is the starting quarterback for the Eagles, they're still unsure of who the starting quarterback is going to be there. They haven't guaranteed it being Hurts. But I think he's destined to be a good tight end. He just needs to have the right quarterback to throw the ball to him. And he's definitely able to get his body down to bulldoze over and truck over cornerbacks and safeties and all that, and he fights for the extra yards. So I definitely think that he has a lot to improve if he's on the right team. Him being on the Eagles, obviously with the wide receiver position not strong, he fits in well there because he's kind of picking up their slack.
Yeah, Jeremy, thoughts on Goddard?
There's a reason why Philly was willing to let Ertz go, because they believe in this kid, right? So they see it, and you can't ignore 830 yards. That's good numbers. But I think, it's a lot is also going to depend on what happens at quarterback there. Is Hurts going to be the guy long term? Are they going to go for someone else? And what impact will that have on him? Especially from a fantasy perspective. I mean, I think that gets impacted more than him as a player. I think that they know they got a good football player, so you're not going to see them drafting a new tight end or anything like that. They got their TE1. The fantasy numbers depend on the quarterback, and the offense and what they do.
Yeah, I agree with that one for sure. It all comes down for who's going to throw the ball to him pretty much. I think if it's not Jalen Hurts, then it could be a struggle year overall, depending on if he throws more to the wide receivers than the tight end.
Yeah, agreed. But let's keep moving here. Coming in at number 8, we had Hunter Henry from the Patriots. 50 catches, 548 yards, and 3 touchdowns projected for 124 points. He ends up with 164 points. We had him projected at 21, finishes 8, 50 catches, 603 yards, but 9 touchdowns. So definitely a good weapon there in New England for Mac Jones. But your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you figure coming into the year, we weren't sure what was going to happen. Him and Janu Smith from Tennessee coming over to New England. Bill Belichick doesn't have a guaranteed one tight end he likes more, but Hunter Henry, I mean, he had a middle of the season stretch there, I think, where he had like 5 straight games with a touchdown. So it definitely helped his stats. It's the only concerning part I would have with drafting him is you're only getting 600 yards. You're not really averaging many yards a game. And you're not really getting many receptions. So that'd be my only bad downside to him. The touchdowns, though, that he does get is what helps out a lot for his numbers, obviously, for the yardage and reception side.
Yeah, Jeremy, thoughts on Henry and having to face him twice a year?
Yeah, well, he's a good player, but my concern, I think it's in line with what Sean is saying. A lot of the points came from 9 touchdowns, and that's always a little concerning because numbers like that, when you see something pop out like that, often regress. It's not like each year, most of the time, it's very rare you see a player get a high number of touchdowns for their position, and that continues year after year. I think that New England is probably going to add on wide receivers. They're probably going to address that position. And that, and guys that can score touchdowns from the outside. And I think that if anything, they're going to open up Mac Jones a little bit more each year to throw deeper to his wide receivers. So it's such a risky, it's not a horrible guy to have, but it's a risky guy to have because if those things happen and that touchdown number drops down to 4, then, you're not getting the player you thought you drafted.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those backup tight ends. He's not starter worthy, I don't think, in fantasy for any team. He's more either that reserve that you have for an injury player or a bye week. I wouldn't consider starting him every week for a full season.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed with that take there. But coming in at number 7, we had Rob Gronkowski, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm not sure. I think he's a free agent as well. I'm not sure if he's going to retire. There were rumors that he wanted to go play with Burrow in Cincinnati. We had him projected 18th overall. He finishes 7th. Ends the year with 55 catches, 802 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Guys, thoughts on Gronk this season and maybe a prediction on where he might play next year?
To think he had 800 yards and he missed a lot at the beginning of the year there with injuries, and throughout games he would get banged up and be out for a select amount of plays on his offense. So he probably could have had 1,000 yards if he was healthy for the full season this year and probably close to 80 receptions. So it's Gronk. I mean, there's always upside to him. You're never going to know what you're going to get from him. He could have had 15 touchdowns this year or 20. It's when he's playing with Brady, you don't know what you're really getting. To what you said about where he plays next year, I honestly see him either being in Buffalo or I see him being retired. I honestly see him wanting to play against like a Bill Belichick 2 games a year, and then also be able to play with a guy like Josh Allen, who probably reminds him like Brady, who's going to be able to sling the ball to him a lot. I'm just not sure if Buffalo wants to take that chance just because they do have Dawson Knox up there already, who's became on the scene this year like it was nothing.
Yeah, agreed. Jeremy, your thoughts on Gronk?
Yeah, well, Gronk is just, he's a special player in this league. Let's be honest. He's just on another planet. Like there's something about this guy. He's freakish. 800 yards after coming back, retiring, coming back. I mean, the guy is just insane. He obviously had a very strong connection to Brady, which is a big part of it. So yeah, I think, we're saying the obvious. It's like, where is he going, right? Where is he going to play? Who's his quarterback going to be? You put him on Cincinnati with Jay Burrow. Wow. Because Burrow's only going to get better. This kid's going to explode as a quarterback. Gronk is special. If he plays with a quarterback who can get him the ball, and he plays with an offense that's competent, why would he go to one that wasn't? Right? He's only going to go to a place that has competent players around him. I want him on my team. I wouldn't have a problem if the top guys were gone. The top 3 guys are gone in the league. I have no problem with Gronk being my T1, but I'm probably going to want to have a really strong backup plan because he does get banged up and, there are some uncertainties there, but I'd be really excited when he's healthy and he's starting. I'm happy with my fantasy team if he's my T.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
Yep, agreed as well. Let's keep moving here to number 6. We have Kyle Pitts from the Falcons. We projected him 6th. He finishes 6th. Points, very close. Projected 174. Finishes 176. But we were off on yards and touchdowns. We had him at 64 catches, 771 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He ends up with 68 receptions, 1,026 yards, and only 1 touchdown. Sean, your thoughts on Pitts?
Obviously, I enjoyed watching him in college, and I knew whenever he went in the NFL, he was going to be reckoning with because I just knew he was a big body tight end who can go down the field like a wide receiver and has the speed and the size. Like he reminds me of Calvin Johnson with how big and fast he is overall. Obviously with the Falcons offense this year, more or less based out of Cordell Patterson out of the backfield inside the red zone, that hurt his numbers. So if Patterson isn't on the Falcons this coming year, I think Pitts can only have a better year. The 1 touchdown definitely is what the risk side of it. That was only, I think that was like week 5. He got that over in London. But he's only going to get better as his career goes on. I mean, it was a rookie year and he's top 6 tight end in the league. I mean, what more can you ask out of a guy that plays on a really bad offense in Atlanta who struggled all year long? So if he plays with the Matt Ryan that went to the NFC Championship, what could the Falcons have with Pitts? I mean, there's a lot to come about, especially with we're not sure if they're going to rebuild or if they're going to try to keep the team and only improve. So he's worth what depending on the offense is. I mean, if the offense is going to be a rebuild mode and go on youth, then he could lose his numbers. But if it's more veterans, then he might improve on numbers as well.
Yeah, agreed. Jeremy, thoughts on Pitts?
Well, I think he might potentially break 1,400 yards receiving next year. When you have a rookie put up over 1,000 yards, and his first 5 games, he was not doing. The Jets were his breakout game. I mean, he had 1 decent game before the Jet game, so he had a learning curve like every rookie. So when you take that away, and you look at the growth of a typical player, their second year compared to their first year. I mean, let's forget about years 3 and 4. This kid's going to be ridiculous. I think the only question about his future is the quarterback, after this year. But obviously the touchdowns are a little bit of a concern. But if you're okay with a guy who's probably going to get 80 receptions and 1,350 to 1,500 yards, even if it's low touchdowns, if that still works for you, that's what I think you're going to get in this kid. If he gets 5 to 8 touchdowns, you're probably getting like the number 1 tight end in the league. So I expect him to, I don't know who it will be, but I think he's going to break into the top 3. I don't know who he's going to replace out of, Kelsey and Kittles and Waller, but I expect him, maybe even 2 of them, but he might even go top 2. But I definitely expect him to break the top, to be somewhere in the top 3 next year. Like next year, we're going to be looking at that pound sign. It's going to be either 3-2 or 1. So, this kid's going to go for tight ends. He's going to go early. I think the only guys I wouldn't take him over is Kelsey and Kittle.
Yeah, see, I could see him replacing maybe Kittle just for the fact that if Jimmy G isn't the starting quarterback there, I think if Trey Lance is a starter there, I think there's a lot more learning curve for him to learn, and Kittle probably won't get the ball as much because Lance is more of a mobile quarterback. So in scenarios where Kittle would just get a quick catch down for 2-3 yards, it could turn into a Trey Lance rush for 2-3 yards.
Yeah, agreed. So before we jump into our top five here, let's take a look at the other rookie tight end from this season. He ended up 13th overall. We had Pat Fryermuth from the Steelers last year in the draft. I was hoping my Jets would have taken him in the second round. They went a different direction. They went wide receiver instead. But guys, thoughts on Fryermuth? Really the only two fantasy tight ends, rookie tight ends worth talking about this season were Pitts and
Yeah.
Fryermuth.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't really become on the scene until probably about week 8, 9. And once he became on the scene and Big Ben knew that he was over there, he kind of started trusting him more. And then towards the end of the year, I think he got banged up and he had like a concussion or something that he was out a game or two there towards the end. But he only got better as the year went on. And I know in the beginning of the year, he wasn't the starter. I think it was
Ebron, I think.
Eric Ebron, I believe, was a starter. And then he overtook, they kind of went to both of them throughout games. And then it slowly went to Fryermuth becoming the starter over Ebron. So I think he'll do good for the Steelers next year. Like we said earlier with Gesicki, it all is going to come down to is who the starting quarterback is and who's throwing the ball to him. If he has a guy that's going to not throw more than 5-10 yards down the field, then there's a lot more upside to a guy like Fryermuth or Gesicki. But if it's a guy that likes throwing Aaron Rodgers style football 20, 30 yards in the air, then Fryermuth probably isn't going to be as worth it, just because of the fact he's not going to get the many receptions as you would want out of a tight end. But he might also improve though on the touchdown side of it, from the fact that the red zones, if it's shorter and being a bigger size guy, he could get those for you.
Yeah, Jeremy, thoughts on Fryermuth?
I mean, assuming, that would be the only thing that threw it off if he had a deep throwing type quarterback. But most likely it's going to be, maybe a guy like Jimmy G. Rudolph might, everyone's forgetting that, Steeler fans saying Rudolph could play. They all want to, a lot of the Steeler fans want to see him get a chance. If Mason Rudolph is the quarterback, look out. I mean, this is a top 8 tight end, in my opinion. The Steelers always have a good system, right? They're very well coached. That's why they don't have losing seasons. So I think this kid came on really strong. I've always liked him, even out of the draft. I mean, I don't think he's breaking into the top 5 necessarily, or anything like that, but I think he's definitely top 10. Could certainly see him ending up at 6th or 7th overall for tight ends, at this time next year when we're looking at this number 13. It might look like a 7 or 8, something like that. I see him going, over a little over 700 yards, maybe more like 65 to 70 receptions, same in touchdowns, maybe up to 10 touchdowns. I mean, he's going to be a really strong tight end. I think he's a nice, solid pick for any fantasy player.
Yeah, it's going to come down. Pretty much it's going to come down to, I think, the quarterback scenario, and what kind of connection he can get there on what his numbers are going to more or less look like.
Yeah, agreed. And I like Mason Rudolph, so I would like to see him get a shot there. And if it is Mason Rudolph, Fryermuth could put up definitely at least match those numbers and definitely improve there as well. But let's jump into our top 5 here. Coming in at number 5, we had Zach Ertz. We had him projected 25th. We kind of thought he'd be the backup in Philadelphia. He ends up getting traded to Arizona. Putting up great numbers, ends the season with 74 catches, 763 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Your guys' thoughts on Ertz there in Arizona, and he's a free agent as well.
Yeah, I mean, once he went to Arizona, it was a whole new season for him. It was like he was refreshed. He had nothing to worry about. He knew he had the starting job, and he just went out there and played Zach Ertz that we knew of 2-3 years ago when he was healthy and he didn't have to worry about a backup in Philly and possibly taking his starting job. But do I see him being a top 10 tight end again in the league next year? Maybe that 10th to 12th, 13th, but a top 5 tight end for sure is definitely not in his wheelhouse anymore, I don't think. I definitely think those days are only going to get behind him, just because wherever he does sign, he's probably going to sign with a team that might already have a tight end, and he might end up playing the dual, kind of like Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. I'm not sure how many teams are going to want to take the risk of Zach Ertz with his history of being injured, as well as him probably wanting a bigger payday.
Yeah, agreed. Jeremy, thoughts on Ertz?
Yeah, I mean he's impressive, and I wouldn't mind I wouldn't mind having him if I had him packaged like on my team with another good tight end I felt comfortable with. Yeah, like I wouldn't want him to be the guy I'm relying on. Yeah, this is my tight end, and I have no real reliable backup because he's gonna have a drop off eventually, right? I mean, he's getting older. You don't know what team he's gonna go to, so it's hard to talk about it completely. And I could see that very easily happening. That if he goes to a team, it's going to be a dual role. Like it's going to be a situation where he's not the guy. Because just like in fantasy, you don't want to gamble. I don't think a real NFL team wants to gamble, right? You're not going to go in where he's your TE1 and that's the guy, and you have nobody at TE2. I think he's more of a complementary tight end to a team with another strong tight end. So to me, he's like a guy you have on the bench ready to go, but like you have, maybe you're starting him sometimes, but you have another real tight end on your roster.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I just think that his starting days might be numbered as of now in his career.
Agreed. But let's keep moving here. Coming in at number 4, we had George Kittle, had him projected third to start the year. Projected 239 points. He ends up with 198. Finished the year with 71 catches, 910 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Another guy. It'll depend on the quarterback situation there in San Francisco, but definitely. I mean, we had him projected third coming into the year, but yeah, definitely a guy you're going to want to take in fantasy. But your guys' thoughts on Kittle?
Yeah, I mean, you already touched on it there. We touched on it earlier with the quarterback scenario. I mean, it's going to come down to that for Kittle for sure on who his quarterback is. Other than that, I mean, I don't see Kittle not having 1,000 yards if he's fully healthy all year long. I think he missed the first 5 weeks or 6 weeks of the season almost. I think with an injury, he was banged up for almost nearly half the year. So if you think about it, if he plays a full season, he's probably top 3 with probably almost 12 to 1,300 yards, if not more, than what he had. So he's definitely going to want a quarterback there, though, that is going to be able to throw him the ball. I wouldn't be shocked if, depending on the quarterback scenario, if they don't talk to like Kittle or Deebo Samuel, like who would you, if you had this choice, if we can bring in him, what would you think of him? Because of just being the veteran that he is, he's not going to want some lower guy coming in. If they sign him, like, all right, well, we'll take the risk. I mean, he obviously played a game or two with Trey Lance this year, and if you look at the numbers in those games, he didn't really have big numbers. So it's going to be hard to say if the Niners trust Trey Lance yet, or if he grew upon it in his rookie year when he was on the bench and learning from Jimmy G and also the playoff run. And then if he can improve in the preseason this year as well.
Yeah, agreed. Jeremy, thoughts on Kittle there in San Francisco?
Yeah, if Trey Lance is his guy, I'd be worried because I'd be worried about just points. Like I could see it being a catastrophe. Like there's a chance that Trey Lance is going to be a complete bust. There really is. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying there's a chance, right? Quarterbacks are like 50-50. Then running is not enough. If all he can do is run and he can't be a passing quarterback, that's not going to help Kittle at all. So I think, but if he's a catastrophe, and let's say the rumors were true, not rumors, but some people have had hot takes that Brady would come out of retirement and jump on the Niners. I'm just saying if that happens, oh my God, then suddenly Kittle is the most dangerous tight end in football. Can you imagine like Kittle with Brady, what that would look like? But I don't know. There's a lot of question marks. He's like my favorite tight ends in the right situation. Like right now. I mean, I love this guy. I mean, he is just an absolute beast. But the question mark is the situation. It's a concern.
Yep.
Yeah. Honestly, if I was the 49ers and if someone even tried to call me and they're like, are you interested in trading Trey Lance? I would probably say, yeah, you got to get rid of him right away. I wouldn't say he's a bust, but I don't think he's going to be starter worthy for 3 to 4 years in the league, just because I don't know why NFL teams want to draft a quarterback like Trey Lance, third or fourth overall on a Division II college, or Division II at North Dakota State. I mean, he's not playing any top schools. He's not playing on a big stage. You only watch them when they have their FCS championship runs. So why would you take that risk? I mean, I get Carson Wentz was from North Dakota State as well, but he wasn't a mobile quarterback. He's the pocket quarterback. So when you draft a pocket quarterback, you already know what you're kind of getting. With a guy that was more or less run 75%, throw for the 25% else that he's not playing, I just don't know why a top NFL team that was in the middle of a rebuild and after being in the Super Bowl 2 years prior to go almost back to it again, why they would want to take the risk and start Trey Lance instead of maybe trying to either get a free agent in for 2-3 years or even trying to get a free agent in for a year or two.
Yeah, agreed there. So lots to keep an eye on out there in San Francisco. But moving on to number 3, we have Dalton Schultz from the Dallas Cowboys, another player that is a free agent, projected 43rd to start the year. Ends up third, like we said, 78 catches, 808 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Both our teams need a tight end. Again, is this somebody we would be willing to pay to come to our teams? But your guys' thoughts on Schultz with the Cowboys this past year?
He had a great year this past year, but he wasn't the starter going into the league, or to the season, should I say. I wouldn't like him on the Vikings just because I think that I'd rather have Gesicki over Dalton Schultz just for the running aspect. Watching the Cowboys games, when they would run the ball, they would run the opposite side of Dalton Schultz. So it kind of concerns me, is he a good blocking tight end? Because they also would run up the middle a lot more with Zeke and everything too. So, but overall, I mean, he had great numbers all year for a team that was more of a passing team, other than when they had the lead and they were trying to run the clock out, they would run the ball. So from that aspect, I think he definitely improved his free agency stock. I mean, he's probably going to get a 2 to 3 year deal wherever he does go. And he'll probably end up playing on a team that is going to maybe, wouldn't say have dual tight end, but also probably have a tight end there that they bring in on occasion and more or less use Schultz for majority of the play. It's just, it comes down to the blocking aspect. Is he a good enough blocker for the running back, is where it's going to help him and get a better deal.
Agreed. Jeremy, thoughts on Schultz?
Yeah, I know a lot of Jet fans are excited and want to get him, and they're saying, spend the money. But it's a very deep draft this year in tight end. Mm-hmm. It's one of the strong positions in this year's draft. There's the question of blocking. The Jets want to be the 49ers offense, right? They want that West Coast offense. They want it to, LaFleur's there. That's the way they want their offense to look. You can't pay $11-12 million for a tight end that can't run block when you want to be a running team.
Right.
You just can't do it. So they would have to look at the tape and really figure out, was it Dallas's offense, or can this guy be a run blocking tight end? But you just have to be really careful about, again, the cap is so limiting and restricting. You got to be really careful where you put your money. So with me, it's, if they get him, I'll trust that they did their due diligence. But man, it's hard to sit there and say I would be excited about paying so much money for him. I mean, I have on some of my off-season draft, and roster building apps that I use, I've gotten them and signed them for like 11 million just for the fun of it. But like when it comes to a real life thing, I think that more like they would have to look at a lot of tape, which they would obviously, about his run blocking and does he fit the scheme. So I mean, I think it would just be whoever signs him, if they're going to pay big money for him, they better use him like Dallas used him and be ready, like if he can't run block, because that's the only scheme he's going to work in and be, worth a lot of money in.
Yeah. Like you touched on there, it is a deep tight end position this year for the draft. So the teams want to try to risk knowing, all right, well, we saw his tape for 2-3 years and playing on Dallas, do you want to take that risk and pay more, or would you rather take more of a risk and get a cheaper tight end that you could probably have for 3 to 4 years with the player option, and have them that you can also improve other positions in the free agency, and you also can possibly build this guy into being a George Kittle, a Travis Kelce, a Darren Waller kind of Mark Andrews player for the season. That's my only aspect with the tight end position. It's such a big position that you kind of could draft more than free agency. And is it worth spending a lot on a guy like him, or a guy like, if him and Gronkowski are the only two left? I mean, I'm probably going to want to get Gronk just because I know what I'm going to get.
Yeah, agreed there as well. Moving on to number 2, we have Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs. We had him projected number 1, 104 catches, 1,300 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Ends up with 92 catches, 1,100 yards, and 9 touchdowns. So definitely a guy you're going to take early on in a fantasy draft. But yeah, your guys' thoughts on Kelce with Kansas City?
It was kind of a down year if you kind of think of Travis Kelce. Look at his projections. We had him projected for everything higher than what he actually got in the touchdowns. So I kind of expected more out of him. I expected to be the top, where last year he had top 5 yardage on the season. I expected that, where he kind of didn't really get the big breakout games like we expected him to have, or get the receptions as well as we expected. I mean, I get the 12 reception projections is only 1 to 2 a game, but if you think about it, those 1 to 2 a game, if you add those up with the yardage, also could equal out to the 13 we projected. I just think that for him having the down year he did, I think he'll bounce back and he'll probably be close to the 1,400 to 1,500 yardage again, as well as the touchdowns, because Patrick Mahomes does really trust Travis Kelce a lot. And when they're inside the red zone, I mean, Travis Kelce can play quarterback, can play halfback, fullback. He can play anything they want him to. I mean, look at how many times this year they played special scenario plays depending on what they had, with Kelce playing here, playing there, doing this, doing that. There's a lot of upside, like you said, though. I mean, he's still a first-round draft pick in any fantasy.
Yeah. Jeremy, thoughts on Kelce?
Yeah, I mean, Kansas City, the first, part of the year, the first, 30% of the year, they have good offensive linemen but they're new. Like, they rebuilt their offensive line kind of. They sort of like getting rid of guys, getting new guys in, and they're all good. And you saw them come together and start to gel and get better and better as the year went on. I think they'll come back much better for a full season. I think I would expect Kansas City to add another weapon on the outside, or at slot or something like that, just another weapon at receiver. And I think all that will help Kelce. I think teams were able to, while Kansas City was struggling, really key on him more. And it was very obvious that Kansas City needed another weapon. He'll need somebody else. They just need somebody, some big, strong target or something to really to help Kelce and Hill out, and Mahomes more than anyone. But anyway, I think he's a first round pick. He's going. I expect that he will be, probably recover and have a 1,300 yardish type year with the 8 to 11 touchdowns and anywhere from 90 to 100 receptions. I mean, he's just so solid. He's such a special player. Definitely everything Sean said is true. I mean, it's like this is one of the guys you want at tight end. When you're looking at a roster and you look at who you have at tight ends, if you have the name Kelce there, you're excited. You're like, okay, you're set at that position.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. I think kind of like you said there, I think with the Chiefs needing an extra player just to expand the offense, I'm thinking this year they'll probably draft more or less the offensive, defensive line issues that they had, the safeties and corner problems that they would have with the injuries. And I bet you they would. I wouldn't be shocked if they don't try to go to free agency and get a tight end, or not a tight end, a wide receiver, just to help and try to keep McCole, Hardman, and Tyreek as their 1-2, but to have a better third, so it expands the offense up open again and can more or less get Travis Kelce, Hill, the room that they need to be open for the receptions that they need.
Yeah, agreed with that take as well. And that moves us to number 1. He ends up number 1. It's a tight end. For some reason, I don't trust. He always puts up great numbers, but I just don't trust him. Mark Andrews with the Baltimore Ravens. We had a projected 4th, 69 catches, 847 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He ends up with 107 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 9 touchdowns. But your guys' thoughts on Andrews with Baltimore?
I wouldn't say he's risk worthy, but he goes off of like how the game is kind of flowing. If the game's flowing like more mobile and they're running the ball a lot, then Mark Andrews is going to have a down game. But if it comes down to it and the Ravens are trailing a touchdown, 2 touchdowns in the game for most of the game, or at least 2 quarters of it, then you're going to get a lot out of Mark Andrews, because that is Lamar Jackson's safe goat. He loves throwing to him, and he'll throw up anything up towards Mark Andrews, knowing that either Andrews is going to get it, or pretty much it's going to come down to being a pass interference play, because Andrews will definitely do what he can to get that call. I think that the 1,300 yards and 100 receptions is about where Mark Andrews' numbers will be every year for a few years to come. My only question is, can he repeat the touchdowns again with the rush offense that they have with Lamar? Or is it going to be more, are they going to have more of a passer-friendly kind of offense going forward, knowing that they saw this year it was kind of successful on passing the ball more? It kind of helped them if they didn't run the ball as much and trusted that they throw the ball a lot more.
Yeah, Jeremy, your thoughts on Mark Andrews?
He just kind of came out of nowhere this year for me, personally. Yeah. I still wouldn't take him over guys like Pitts and Kelce. But I think he's definitely, it's not like I wouldn't say I don't trust him. Like, I think he's going to be really good. He'd still be like a tight end I'd be really happy with. I just wouldn't take him over some of those guys. So I still expect him to be, top 5 because of Baltimore's offense and just that team and the consistency of the team. I just don't. I'm not convinced he's the number 1 tight end in the NFL. That's all. Like, I wouldn't take him above some of those other dudes. Like, again, I don't know about Kittle because it depends on who the quarterback is, so that's a little up in the air. But like Kelce, Pitts, those are the guys I really like, honestly.
Yeah, and from that aspect too, where Kittle, we're not sure what he's going to have. That's why I kind of like Andrews a little bit more. I mean, I think he's a top 3 just for the fact that we already know what he's getting and what he's going to be giving us with Lamar. So that's at least one aspect that he's going to have. It's just from there, it comes down to it is what comes about his overall season. Is it going to be a successful one for the Ravens, or will it be another kind of 5th to 6th overall season for him where people could bounce back and show that and overjump him as the number 1?
Agreed. So let's take a look. That was our top 10, but let's go through the list again. At number 10, it was Gesicki from Miami. At 9 was Goddard. 8 was Hunter Henry. 7 was Gronkowski. 6 was Pitts. But we also included Freiermuth because he was a rookie, but he finished 13th. Ertz, number 5. Kittle, 4. Schultz, 3. Kelce 2, and Andrews number 1. Guys, are there any tight ends where maybe that due to some injury didn't end up in the top 10 and that you are looking forward to playing again next year?
I think the definite ones that would be shocking that weren't in the top 10 was Darren Waller from injury. That's definitely, and also Dawson Knox from Buffalo. I mean, definitely was shocked by that he didn't end up making a top 10 just because of how he had a breakout season for Buffalo this year with Josh Allen.
Yeah, he did miss a lot of time. I'm going to look that up right now. But Jeremy, yeah, same thing for you. Anybody that's not on the list that could improve?
Yeah, I mean the guy obviously when you go through it, like if you didn't know like how many games he missed and everything, you're like wondering when you're going to see Waller's name pop up. If you go by the last few years of football, it's like where's Waller? Where's Waller? I mean, as long as he comes back healthy, he's an incredible weapon on offense. I mean, he's just a tall, big, lanky, strong, fast dude, and he's going to as long as he comes back healthy and he's okay. I expect him to be right back in the top 8 and, maybe even higher and big part of the conversation at tight end. It's just, so it's just kind of like, man, where'd he go? So that's the big question mark on him is just, is he healthy and is he going to be able to resume 100% of, where he was? And if the answer is yes, then, he'll be right back in his place.
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead. And some of the guys that didn't make the top 10 here, like you guys said, Dawson Knox, didn't make it. Noah Fant from Denver, Higbee from the Rams, Hawkinson from the Lions, and Waller due to the injuries. But yeah, so definitely some guys that were missed some time this year that are gonna be back next year and hopefully improve. But let's take a look. We have a couple more minutes here. Jeremy, this is where I might need a little bit of your expertise. Let's take a look at the guys that are available for this year's NFL draft. I have that here. Share. And let's zoom in. So some guys I really like that are eligible for the draft this year are definitely I've only looked at 2 so far. Trey McBride from Colorado State and Jake Ferguson from Wisconsin. But tell me a little bit about those 2 guys and maybe some guys not so high up on that list that we could take a look at.
Well, I think Trey McBride is the clear stallion of the draft. But understand that part of that is because he does both. Because he could be a run blocker and a blocking tight end, pass defend, blocking and for pass rush, everything. Wademeyer is a bit one-sided to the receiving side. So that's not a bad pick for a fantasy player, right? If he goes to the right situation and the right team, because that's what this is all about. It's really where you go. Obviously, we know that. So if Wademeyer goes to the right situation, that they're looking for a receiving tight end, let's say like for somehow he ended up on Dallas and Dallas is replacing Schultz. There's a guy you could see him possibly post up some nice big juicy numbers because they would use him the way they use Schultz. So you can imagine what the potential is there. I think another guy that is not talked about as much as I like Ferguson is a guy named Cade Otton, who's very, very impressive, very good receiving tight end. I would definitely look, and check him out. And man, there's some. I'm trying to look. This Greg Dildish guy is coming up the board. I'm not a tremendous fan like other people are. I've cooled off a lot on Kolar because he did not impress at the combines at all. But I would really look at, if the rookies coming in, there's only a few I'd really consider that could right away make an impact. Wademeyer, if he goes to a team like Dallas, Trey McBride, no matter where he goes, I would look at him. I wouldn't go too crazy on him because, you see it's hard to make a big impact as a rookie. And then I think Jake Ferguson, had a great Senior Bowl. So he looked exciting as well. And again, in the right situation, I don't expect maybe even a legacy league, you tuck him away. I don't expect him to have a great rookie year or anything, but there's this guy Otton that a lot of people are overlooking that I think is going to be a very, possibly a very good receiving tight end in the league in years to come. Also, and you can't leave out Isaiah Likely. So Isaiah Likely is kind of like a Wademeyer, not a blocking tight end, but if Likely ends up in the right situation, he could end up being the best rookie tight end for fantasy numbers.
Gotcha. Sean, I know your Vikings, like our Jets, need a tight end. Have you started looking at any of the available guys in the draft?
No, just because there's so many free agents available, I kind of would want to see what they decide to do with the free agency side of it. I think if they could fill the tight end role for Kirk Cousins, I think then they could focus more or less on the defense side of the ball and maybe fitting a piece or two into the offensive line. They don't really need to improve on too much overall. It's just the kind of tight end position is kind of weak for them. And then probably from there, trying to improve all the weak spots we had on the defense is what we really need to trust and do, for the fact that Kirk Cousins is able to throw for 3-4 touchdowns a game. But if you give up 4 or 5 touchdowns a game, you're not going to be able to win many of them.
Yeah, agreed. So we'll start taking a look at some of these guys with the combine ending today, and then the draft coming up. But free agency starts in like 9 or 10 days or something like that. So with a couple minutes left here, let's over on Twitter. I follow a guy. It's a page just called NFL Rumors. It kind of puts all the rumors into one spot. So let's take a look at some of these. Amari Cooper. I know the Dallas Cowboys are trying to are willing to trade him, but they're also willing to cut him. Your guys' thoughts on Cooper, and if the Jets or Vikings should go after a player like Cooper?
I'm not shocked by it. I definitely saw it coming just for his cap space, but I honestly see him going to a team where he's going to want a decent amount of money, just because of his youth and then what he still has left in him. But he's so injury prone now, it's hard to want to guarantee he's going to have a great year. I could see him going, though, to a team like maybe like Washington, maybe even the Eagles, the Chiefs, maybe even possibly wanting to take the risk on him and signing him. I think it'll come down to the money aspect, though.
Mm-hmm. So, Jeremy, I know some of the other Jet YouTubers that we watch have put out videos about Cooper, but what are your thoughts on Amari Cooper?
I don't see how he's a good fit for the Jets, unless you sign him for a 1 year, 2 year deal, 1 year guaranteed. I don't see how he's a good fit. I mean, I could see him in a very short term, because the Jets have plenty of cap space. So if they wanted to bring him in for the specific purpose of helping Zach Wilson just for a year, or two, or, as an experienced receiver, that might be the only way that I could see it happening. But if you look at where the Jets are as a team in their rebuild, it makes no sense, because Cooper is not young, so when you look at, if you want to be realistic about how long it's going to take for the Jets to, even if everything goes right, to be a serious contender in the league for, everybody's goal of Super Bowl, by the time that realistically would happen, except if there's an anomaly, like, people think, oh, Cincinnati did it. Let's be realistic. How long, you can't just say it would happen for them, so it should happen for anyone. You got to be realistic and know that the reality is it takes in a big rebuild 4 to 5 years. So even if the Jets were to do it in 3 years, and become a serious contender, who's Amari Cooper in 3 years from now? I just don't. I think he's on the wrong side of his prime. I think it's not going to get better. His numbers are only going to get worse. So if they brought him in a short-term 1 year contract for whatever reason, because nobody wanted to pay him, whatever it was, I'd be okay for this season to help Zach Wilson. But as a long-term, bring in your big guy that's going to be your wide receiver for the next 3 to 4 years. If you do it through free agency, I'm not interested.
Right. And here a little bit further down, he put 4 teams expected to have interest in Amari Cooper are the Dolphins, Bears, Chiefs, and Patriots. Yeah, I could definitely see the Chiefs. Sean, you had mentioned them adding another weapon. I don't know if they would wait to see if he got cut, or maybe throw a late round pick at Dallas there. But says some other players here. 3 teams expected to show interest in Fournette are the Bills, Texans, and Eagles. If those are his only 3 options, where's his best fit, do you guys think, out of Buffalo, Houston, and Philadelphia?
None of the above. I don't really see him being a fit in in Buffalo or the Eagles for the fact that they already have young running backs. They're not going to want to go and sign a guy like that and then kind of backtrack themselves on what they already have kind of started with the running backs they have. He's definitely not going to want to sign with the Texans. He would probably rather sit at home than sign with the Texans just because he's not going to want to go from a championship caliber team and say, I'm going to go play on a rebuild team. But I could see him maybe signing with like Oakland or Las Vegas, maybe playing with Josh Jacobs. I could definitely see that and being the number 1-2 kind of punch that they have with Derek Carr. But I also could see him possibly even going and being possibly, it would be a long stretch, is playing on the Giants. Just because the Giants then would know they have someone that they can trust running the ball if they were to move on from Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, Jeremy, when he brought up the Raiders, you were shaking your head.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking definitely Raiders. I could completely see that. I think a lot of people like the idea of playing in Vegas and playing for the Raiders. I think that one of the advantages the Raiders have, just as an NFL organization, is for whatever reason, like it's just a desirable landing spot for players. So I think, I think there are certain teams but based on locations or certain circumstances, their historical presence from the NFL perspective, who they are as an organization historically and where they are. And I just see a lot of players are going to want to in the future. I think that it's an attractive destination for a lot of players. These are young guys, Vegas, the whole thing. But the Raiders are going to have to be careful about that because you saw that, there's a lot of there's a negative to that. I could see him. It might be a crazy take, but I could see him wanting to go or being, whether he's a fit or not. But I could see him wanting to go to San Francisco. Running team. They're losing. I forgot what his name, Mozart or whatever his name is. He's a free agent. I could see him fitting in there. They got a young running back there in Mitchell, and I could see Fournette fitting into that system. If he was for the right price, I wouldn't even think it. I think the Giants, it's a good take, because Saquon is so unreliable. I wouldn't even be super, super shocked if the Jets wanted to, got him for the right price and wanted to pair him with Michael Carter.
So let's look at some other. Oh, Sean, did you have something else there?
The only thing with the Niners, I think I saw this week that they actually were in talks with Mostert and his agent about taking a short-term deal for cheap, just to bring him back again, just because when he does play, he's worth it for them. And I think they want to bring him back just so he could be that veteran to Sermon and Mitchell. And then they would have already their 3 running backs at a cheap deal because you think about it, Mitchell was a 6th-round pick, and he was their star player as a 6th-rounder. So he played better than their 2nd-round pick or 1st-round pick in Sermon.
Yep.
So I think that if they can bring back Mostert, I think that would actually help them because then they can more or less base off, all right, well, if we get him cheaper, we have the cap space. Do we sign a quarterback that's a free agent, like maybe a Jameis Winston? And then we can start picking up pieces that we need at like the cornerback position that they struggled with. And then be able to re-sign the players that they have. I think Tuesday, I think, is the day that franchise tagging can begin. I think or maybe even Wednesday. I thought it was like March 9th or 10th that they could start franchise tagging players. So I think once teams start saying, all right, well, we're franchising this one player or we're not going to do any player, I think that would probably change a lot of points of who's going to do what. Also for the fact that a lot of contracts are guaranteed starting March 9th when the new season begins, technically for players. So we know about Amari Cooper getting likely released. How many other players haven't been mentioned that could get released and start freeing up all that cap space and dead cap that could be coming on teams when they want to get it ready for free agency, and also possibly even trying to get them to rework deals with players so they can get more money for people. Because I know we saw people like the Saints with Michael Thomas. They worked that contract out, so it was more guaranteed up front so they had more long term with him and having the cap space.
Yeah, agreed. So, like Sean, the last couple of videos we've done, you keep saying what kind of off season it's going to be. A lot to happen yet. But we'll be back Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time to discuss more free agency news. But guys, if you're watching, make sure you give Jeremy at NFL Chaos with Jeremy a follow. Jeremy, why don't you give out your channel information and what kind of things you got going on over on your channel?
Okay, it's just NFL Chaos with Jeremy. We're doing a lot of Jets coverage, but we're starting to expand out. I'm getting different experts from different teams. Again, still working. We got a 49ers guy that comes on. We got I just had an LA Rams content provider on, giving us perspective of the LA Rams. We take recommendations from our followers. So, we're one big family. My channel is NFL Chaos with Jeremy. Just give us a sub, check it out. Right now, tonight, we got we did an off-season simulator tool for the Jets. And now, based on the free agents that we picked up for the Jets and the roster that we've built, we are going to have a dueling draft. Me and my friend Dom C are going to rotate back and forth and draft the team based on the new information of the free agents that we signed, who we cut, who we let go, and who we retained.
So, guys, make sure you give Jeremy a follow there, NFL Chaos for Jeremy. Like I said, we'll be back Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button here as well. Guys, thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you Thursday.
See you guys.
See ya.